let me go down some slides here. So yeah, you've obviously had my introduction, so I'll try and get through these. But yes, as Aaron said, I've been with the company now since we started, which is almost 20 years ago now. So yeah, I've got a lot of experience. I've worked on lots of big projects around the world. The company itself, Avolution, we've got offices all around the world. I'm based out of our Sydney office in Australia. We've got an office, a satellite office in Singapore. So that's where we'll support Aaron and his team from. But yeah, we're all around the world. We've clients in more than 100 countries now. Okay, so let's have a look at this topic specifically. So when we talk about digital and we talk about the whole EA practice in the digital world, obviously this year, 2020, has thrown us some curveballs, and what we've found is that as much as it was, and it always has been a focus to be digital, it's become more so. So you can see there a statistic that's come out of Gartner, and this was even last year. They basically had already started to show a ramp up in a third of the finance CIOs identify digital as a top priority. So again, what does digital mean? We'll look into that. But Aaron's already talked about this, where he talks about a digital map, having some digitization of your business. Okay, so that's where you're starting to codify and use structured designs to describe your business. So whether that's through diagrams, whether it's through catalogs, matrices, all the different things that something like TOGAF advocates as different artifacts or different views that you might take. So yes, and then this year, 2020, of course, we're all aware, with COVID-19, remote working is now, of course, the norm. We're all working from home, as you can see. I'm at home. So all around the world now, all the different people. So that, of course, throws a whole lot of challenges, as you've seen. I've thankfully had a backup laptop, so I've switched to that. One of my laptops packed it in. Needless to say, cybersecurity now is a big challenge, making sure that everything's secure with VPNs and things like that. So, just quick sound check. So it's all okay, is it, Aaron? The audio's okay and the screen sharing's okay? Yeah, great. Okay, sorry. I was a bit concerned because I've gone to an old laptop here. Right, let's have a quick look. So Aaron already showed you a bit of the footprint for ATD, and that's, of course, the Southeast Asian region. So we have an office in Singapore, like I said. We have offices in the Middle East, in Europe, North America, South America. So we've certainly expanded all around the world. There'll be more offices coming online over time. But yeah, as it is now, we've got pretty good footprint. We certainly can, as they say, follow the sun. So there's always someone awake in Avolution somewhere in the world. So the support team is always on 24/7. We kind of follow the sun with that. Development as well is similarly done. A couple of the sort of logos of the clients that we have in the finance sector. Some of those you probably recognize, UOB in Singapore. Then there's other ones that, of course, the headline names that you'd know, companies like Barclays in the UK and AXA in Europe, and even Standard Chartered actually in Singapore as well is another client of ours. So we've got we have thousands of clients, right? So this is just a sort of a selection of some of the ones that hopefully you guys recognize. And with Aaron and his team, we'll obviously be expanding out to some more finance. What that is interesting, though, is that we're building a lot of benchmarks. We're building a lot of expertise in this domain. Okay, and I'll talk a fair bit about reference models and talk about things like BIAN, ABACUS, of course, an insurance one. But we're building some domain knowledge, which, of course, we're trying to get the different clients of ours to collaborate. So there's user groups and things like that where they can do that and share things with, as much as it's sanitized, but they can share things with each other and do work that, obviously benefits the whole industry. Right, where do you start though? So financial services obviously is transforming like every industry. This is kind of like a bit of a word cloud. Really what you're seeing is all the standard sort of things that most businesses are looking at, understanding, roadmaps, looking at customer experience, of course, digital transformation, migrating to the cloud, all those sort of things. What we've learned, I've been doing this for enough years now, is there's a phrase which is, don't try and boil the ocean, right? So don't try and do everything. Pick a few use cases, indeed pick one use case, which already has buy-in from the business stakeholders, which as Aaron said, technology underpins every business strategy. That's a fact of life, and it's more so now. So pick a use case that you already have some sort of traction with and apply the enterprise architectural rigor to that. get yourself a quick win. You certainly want to, have some success stories to talk about. Within 3 to 6 months, you should absolutely be delivering something of value that quickly. You probably know through Gartner, they talk about time to value as one of their metrics, and we always come out number one with that. Number of reasons I won't go into today, but really try to deliver some benefit very quickly. Okay, the business is impatient, like everyone. So needless to say, pick a use case that is actually, I won't say easy, but has some traction already. Something that an enterprise architectural approach will benefit and give some rigor and some quantitative guidance to. A couple of case studies, some success stories. So these again are companies that I presume most of you have heard of. So the MAN Group is a big investment group based out of Europe. So they've done a lot of application work with ABACUS. So they need to look at assessing applications and deciding on the roadmaps for them and things like that. So all these are well documented case studies we can provide to you. If you drop Aaron an email or myself, I'll give my contact details at the end. And we can give you these. I think these are available through the website as well if you want to go to our site and download them. KLP's a big pension provider in Norway. They're the largest one there. So again, they had particular ideas around governance, and there was, of course, all the, the GDPR stuff that came out of Europe. I presume you guys are all familiar with that. So the whole interesting side around data privacy. They needed to have some quick ways that they could provide information to people when they requested it. So there's all different regulations under that. First Interstate Bank in the US, again, they're very tightly integrated. It's a small architecture team, but they're very tightly integrated with the business. And so the business have these questions. They go into these meetings with their tablets and they ask them questions. Who's responsible for this process? What applications support it? So having that digital map, as Aaron calls it, we talk about it as the single source of truth. The enterprise on a tablet, right? Having that available to you, and it's interactive. You can click on buttons and drill in, and I'll show you some of this stuff. Being able to do that on the fly is very important because it answers the questions right there and then, as the business wants to, in the time frame that they're interested in. Okay, specifically financial services. What do the EAs need in the financial services industry? So we use this phrase, it's about end-to-end connectedness. Okay, so ultimately, if you're just dumping in different artifacts and you've got like a disjoint spreadsheet, and you've got a disjoint Visio diagram or PowerPoint slide deck, or even if you're embedding just basic diagrams in some kind of web-based platform, there's no connectedness. Okay, there's no line of sight, as Aaron talked about, all the way potentially from strategy through to execution. Okay, now again, don't boil the ocean. You don't have to have everything perfectly well captured, but being able to reason about, why is something here? How is it contributing to the overall business goals? Understanding something about the context of things, which you get through a connected repository. So where everything is, got some sort of interrelationships between things. And, ArchiMate talks about that with the layers between the different domains, right? So every framework has a way, of course, of thinking about this, but ultimately it is just fundamentally showing the entire enterprise, or potentially the entire enterprise, in a single place. Okay, so we call that, of course, the digital business or the digital enterprise. It's the digital map. So having all that stuff end to end. Now, financial services EAs, like all EAs, that's a mandatory requirement. Being able to actually have all that stuff at your fingertips. Now, again, let's not be too scared here. This doesn't mean boiling the ocean. So I've said that one twice now. We have all these accelerators. Okay, and this is what I'll talk a bit about today. There are reference models out there that are quick starts to how you do this. So there's kind of two types. There's ones which are domain specific. Okay, so again, something like BIAN or BIAN is an a banking one. ACORD is insurance. APQC, which comes out of the US, they have a whole lot of industry reference models as well. But then there are some cross-domain models. Okay, so ArchiMate, TOGAF, which we're certified to support both of those. Even BPMN and any of the notations, UML, any of those sort of things, they're cross-industry or cross-domain. Okay, so you can use those, and indeed building a hybrid where you start with some business reference model and then underpin that with a structural repository like TOGAF is perfectly great. Okay, and I'll talk about that as these hybrids. And again, one of the reasons we have this fast time to market is these accelerators, and because ABACUS is highly configurable. right? You can just mash these things together, drag and drop different frameworks together very quickly. You're not wrestling with the tool, to try and get your content in. The tool will adapt to the information you have to hand, be it an off-the-shelf framework like BIAN, or something like TOGAF, and obviously supports all the methodologies there that Aaron and his team can help you do. Now, of course, another phrase we like to use is citizen-driven enterprise architecture, or democratizing enterprise architecture. Making this team, making it a team of people that are collaborating together, putting this in the hands of the information owners. Okay, so this is an animation showing like a catalog and how people can be managing. It's like a spreadsheet online, right? Managing information relevant to their world. So you use all your permissions to quarantine what people are working on. But either way, just make it very easy for people to contribute work and their information into the repository. You're not stuck drawing diagrams necessarily. So we'll talk about the kind of the tension, or dare I say the complement between what we call data-driven and diagram-driven enterprise architecture. So certainly being data-driven is very efficient. Okay, people are used to filling in lists, right? It's very easy. We have a great online way of doing that. Integrating though with the sources of truth you have already. Okay, so certainly even just as far as your Active Directory integration and single sign-on, so we can onboard people very quickly. We typically embed within Teams or Slack or something like that, so people don't have to remember URLs or anything like that. They just get in, fill in the content they need to do. But integrating with other repositories you might have. So whether you've got all of your servers in ServiceNow or something like that, whether you've got content in SharePoint, pulling in things like that to build a repository quickly, and of course, collaborate on it and keep it up to date. The worst thing you can have is that dinosaur, that repository that was last touched 5 years ago and is completely out of date. This is a living, breathing artifact that people should be using. Okay. Now, of course, if you've got lots of content, you do need to segment that, and you need to make it role-based. Okay, you need to give people a dashboard. We call them the dashboards, collections of portlets. You'll see that, which basically is content relevant to them. So TOGAF gives you a lot of guidance about stakeholder management, what views are of interest to stakeholders. So there's a lot of work out there that can help you shape the dashboards for people. We, of course, have dashboards off the shelf that we can use. Essentially, a dashboard is something that should be trying to answer a question for somebody. Okay, so we talk about them as either mission-based, so they might be doing like an application rationalization or a GDPR piece of work. They might be role-based, so you might be an application manager, so you need to see your world, right? So there's different ways. There's project-based dashboards where people are obviously contributing content relevant to their project, and that's a way of sourcing information. But either way, these self-service dashboards, they're dashboards that people get. It's like their start screen. It's what they use. They just fill in things and they edit a diagram, update a catalog, whatever it might be, do some impact analysis, and I'll show you that kind of stuff. But it's all relevant to their world. Okay, and that makes it obviously very easy, and it's familiar to them. Don't get too bogged down in notations. Okay, you do need to have some consistency, so people, obviously talking the same language. But yeah, don't get too caught up. If someone likes to use one notation versus another, that's fine. A repository should be able to support that, and we certainly can. Okay, let's have a quick look at, essentially this whole world around reference models and where this is at. So, yep, some familiar statistics, I'm sure, for you guys. No matter how much we think things are off the shelf, yeah, they get configured. So certainly the statistics we have are, better than half of off-the-shelf things almost, gets configured still, right? ABACUS is the same. We're an off-the-shelf product. You can use it on day one using one of our standard accelerators and our standard, reference models. But because it's configurable in your hands, you will spend time adding a new field, adding a new notation, tweaking the dashboards, doing all that yourself. So, obviously, giving you control over your own repository is very important. And, Aaron and his team have the expertise to be able to do that configuration for you and help you shape a repository that answers the questions you guys have. And obviously, we're living with a lot of legacy. So, trying to pull in some of that content and be able to, make it, at least visible and understandable is pretty important. So this is, again, where a reference model comes in. And I'll look at BIAN in particular today, but there's any number of other ones. I've mentioned, APQC has them. There's, if you're in insurance industry, there's ACORD. We support all of these, but I only had time to really look at one today. So, so a reference model just gives you a good, common point of place, okay? Something that people can be familiar with. You know, it has boxes that they hopefully recognize. It's standard, so they can talk between companies. You know, you can look at benchmarking. Okay, you can look at, you know, how much you're doing for check processing versus, you know, the industry standard. So there's lots of things like that that we have benchmarks. Okay, so yeah, let's have a quick look at BIAN or BIAN. So that it's, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it. If you're not, it's all freely available online. Go and have a look. It's bian.org. It should be easy to find. So yeah, look, essentially it's a collection of best practices. It has a lot of content, and I'll show you some of this. It has you know, thousands of objects well reasoned in there, which we of course have, you know, support and you can use. It is a membership-based organisation though, so while we can support it and we provide it, you do need to be a member of BIAN, which isn't expensive, so certainly I'd encourage you to join to be able to, you know, make use of it and things like that. So and obviously they want you to contribute and, you know, give your perspective on things and tweak things. So it's pretty active in its refresh cycle. So they're at version 8 now. That actually came out about a year ago. So they do tend to come out every kind of 1 to 2 years. So certainly it's continually being refreshed. Now, every company who adopts it ends up configuring it and changing it as well. So ultimately it goes through a standards process where they accept some of the modifications that people have done. So it has essentially a service-oriented architecture philosophy behind it. So they have what's called the service landscape, and I'll show you this in ABACUS in a sec. It's essentially a hierarchical, you know, functional model. Okay, so it starts with what they call business areas, then business domains, and then goes down through to service domains. Okay, so it's many layers. I think it's 4 at least layers, and there's over 300 service domains that they define. There's then processes that are aligned with these service domains. There's a basic organizational structure that matches the service domains. So really what you're looking at is that, you know, that business architecture is reasonably well put together. So you now just need to underpin it with your specifics. You know, what applications do you use, right? How are you actually organizationally structured? So they start with like departments. They have like 6 departments. So how do you then break down your organizational structure underneath the covers? So, you know, the process side of things is done pretty well. And if you think of, you know, architecture as the holy trinity of 3 things, you know, people, process, and technology, you've just got to fill out the technology dimension and the people dimension. Okay, but the process dimension is really well defined. Now, the information dimension is also in there too, and I'll show you that. There's a whole object kind of, you know, side to things, you know, information objects and stuff like that too. So you get a lot of this stuff and you don't have to, of course, reinvent the wheel. But remember, this is an industry reference model, right? So it doesn't really advocate how you should do those things underneath, the technology layer, let's say, underneath, okay? So that's where you can use, of course, something like TOGAF, okay? So TOGAF or ArchiMate, you know, these are very strong when it comes to, you know, doing technology architecture. Okay, they of course have a position on business architecture and things like that. But if you're going to use something like BIAN, then you of course want to take the BIAN layer at the top and underpin it with something like TOGAF beneath it. Okay, and that's fine. We've got those repositories. You can start with that. It's one of our accelerators. We have all these different hybrids that people can choose from, and off they go, start filling in things. Now, of course, you know, we support, you know, the OMG standards as well, like business process modeling, business process and modeling notation, UML, there's BPMN, which is the business motivation model. There's lots of different approaches there as well that we support. Okay, fundamentally though, you've got to select a framework, as it says here, that works. Okay, we don't sell any of our frameworks. Okay, they're all freely available. Now, as I mentioned, you might have to be a member of something like BIAN to be able to use it, but from our point of view, we don't charge anything from any of our frameworks, okay? The reason for that is because we encourage people to adopt, you know, to adapt them and change them and make hybrids, work out things that work perfectly well for them, okay? So we don't try to do that. You know, we want to teach you guys how to do that and work with, you know, Aaron and his team to do that, because it's not in our interest to try to own that. You know, that meta model, that part of it is yours. You know, that's your way you describe your business. So you do have to ask some questions though. You do have to decide, well, am I addressing my stakeholder needs with what I'm doing, right? Can I, of course, do that line of sight from top to bottom? So is it just a business one or just a technology one? So of course, when we talk about BIAN with ArchiMate, you've got pretty good coverage there, right? Sorry, BIAN with TOGAF, you've got pretty good coverage, okay? There's a maturity concept that does need to sort of flow through this. When you start off, you want to start simple. And I talked about doing something of value quickly, you know, within 3 to 6 months. So you certainly don't want to be, you know, starting off with an application register that's got 50 columns and, you know, filling in your thousands of rows. You know, that's too much. You don't need to do that, right? Start with a very simple application list. And of course, you've probably already got it in a spreadsheet. So just import it and that's fine. And then, you know, make it a live sheet in ABACUS as a catalog. And of course, you know, ABACUS is future-proof. It's all very configurable. You can change anything you want. We're never going to box you into a corner in how you represent things. You can refactor meta models on the fly. It's very simple to do. Now, of course, it has pervasive effects, so you've got to do it with caution, and there's a whole, you know, governance process behind that. But it certainly can be done. You know, there's the Spider-Man, you know, one-liner, which is, you know, just because you can doesn't mean you should. You know, with great power comes great responsibility, right? So there's a lot of power there, but you do have to be cautious about what you do. But you can. Okay, just a quick little sort of position statement on how we see this, you know, data-driven versus diagram-driven. You'll hear a fair bit in the market from different vendors of those two camps, and, you know, we could happily plonk some competitors' logos into those two sides there. So newer to the market are some new entrants that talk about being data-driven. Okay, and they, you know, they're all about, you know, list-based stuff and you know, whatever tabular information and stuff like that, and they're usually very weak in a diagrammatic sense. They can generate diagrams maybe, but they're pretty weak. The historical tools are much more stronger in the modeling and the diagramming side of things. Okay, and they, you know, a lot of them came out of just drawing tools, right? So we've been around for 20 years, right? You know, we've been doing both of these. You know, the research we did back in, you know, the last, you know, before 2000 was all about, you know, how can you obviously build a single repository that has all these different types of views, whether they're catalogs, whether they're diagrams, doesn't matter. What we want to be able to do is analyze the information that's there, do roadmaps, you know, do all the different value add you get by having a digital view of the business. And we've been doing this for 20 years, right? You know, we've got you know, the best of both worlds here. You know, if you certainly want to be diagram heavy, that's fine. If you want to be data heavy, that's fine. We, of course, think you should do both. Okay. And then exploit, you know, we've got machine learning, right? We've got no code analytics. You know, we've got lots of really cool things that go on top of that, that really pulls those two different perspectives together. So that's just my kind of, you know, my kind of caution is, you know, be careful. Don't be sold the diagramming dream or the data dream. You know, obviously be sold both. You know, there's no reason not to have both, and we offer both and have for forever. That's how we started 20 years ago. A couple of quick sort of example dashboards. I'll show you some BIAN ones. So these are just generic ones. This one's really just showing you fundamentally the result of some of the finance algorithms we have. So, you know, we practice what we preach, and we work in the financial services industry. So we have algorithms that can do, you know, total cost of ownership and, you know, different technical debt calculations and enterprise debt calculations. So we have different, you know, monetary algorithms. There's a couple of animations going on here, but, you know, ultimately looking at different scenarios. You can see the 4 different $9 billion numbers there, you know, looking at different scenarios so we can have multiple states of the repository and then compare the same set of metrics across different states. Okay, so you can look at options. You can say, well, what if we did this or that? Cost it out, right, by running the algorithms. And they're just continually running. We have an algorithm engine that's just continually running, doing the different analytics that you might design. And, you know, again, that's all done through no code, which I'll show you a bit of later. But yeah, fundamentally using metrics to make decisions. You know, so this stuff doesn't have to be qualitative. It can also include, of course, a qualitative dimension and, you know, the different aesthetics about how you might design something and, you know, diagrammatically, but don't turn your back on metrics. You know, numbers are very important with all the caveats of measurement theory, which, you know, I won't go into, but, you know, don't confuse precision with accuracy. You know, just because, you know, we give you an answer to, like here, these, you know, nine significant figures, you know, there is some, you know, variation on that. You know, it's not necessarily, you know, accurate to, you know, 5 decimal places, right? Yep, a little quick animation about our no code stuff. And again, I'll show some of this in the demo. Yeah, look, essentially, we want people to be being quantitative about this, right? So we put a lot of work into building this and putting this into your hands, okay? So we don't have to write these algorithms behind the scene. They're not hard-coded into ABACUS, mysterious black boxes. We no-code these. We provide them to you. There's a whole library online. We have a whole community where people share their algorithms. And you can go in there, contribute your algorithm, download algorithms, apply them to your repository, okay? So algorithms should be a commodity that's shared around. Okay, now companies will tweak them and customize them to be specific to their own business, and you might want to keep that as some, you know, some valuable IP that you don't share. But, you know, fundamentally, this should be in your hands. You know, how do you work out what is risk? How do you work out what is security? How do you work out what is cost? We can give you a starting place and give you a no-code algorithm, but you should tweak it. We definitely believe in transparency. Right? We've got a whole graph database. We don't hide anything. Nothing's encrypted. You guys can see everything that's in there, with all the security side of things, of course. But likewise, all the algorithms, they're all perfectly transparent. Okay, we give them to you. They're no-coded, so you can see and tweak them and change them. So you don't have to live in a bit of a black box. Trust is a very important thing. I did a big presentation about trust recently, but you're going to, when you're working with business stakeholders, they're going to want to trust your recommendations. Okay, so the best way to build that trust is to be transparent and say, look, this is the algorithm we've used, and here it is. There's nothing mysterious here. If we've done something wrong, let's find it, let's change it, right? So you obviously can tweak things and get them to be right. It's not just a mysterious black box. There's also a whole topic to be had about hybrid analytics. Okay, what I mean by that is merging deterministic and non-deterministic analytics. Okay, so a no-code algorithm is a deterministic algorithm, right? You give it a single set of inputs, it'll give you the same output each time. We have a whole machine learning dimension to ABACUS. Okay, whole AI dimension. So the machine learning can produce numbers and insights as well. So you actually can harvest those two things into algorithms. Okay, so you can build up things. And I'll talk about this, how you can kind of make suggestions. And this is the important thing, is the tool will suggest something. That doesn't mean you should necessarily adopt it. Okay, so ultimately it's still an architect's decision, what should be done. Okay, let's just take a quick segue now to how I wanted to try and show you ABACUS. So sorry, I have had to jump to another machine. So I'll go into this again. Should be able to. This has got single sign-on, so it should just sign me in. So Aaron, I'm not sure if you're there. Just let me know if you can see my screen. Okay, I think it should be okay. It's definitely quite zoomed in on this monitor. So yeah, I don't know. Is there a thumbs up from someone, or Audrey? Do you want to just unmute and just let me know that's okay? It's coming through okay? Anyone? No? I'm not sure. Is it working okay? I hope I haven't just dropped off. Well, look, I'll soldier on. It still says it's recording for me, so I hope it's still working. Audrey, are you there? Is it coming through okay?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay, sorry. All right, great, guys. Sorry, I just don't like speaking into the ether. I might actually do a couple of control pluses here just to zoom in a bit. Yeah, so hopefully it gets a bit bigger for you guys, so you might be able to read it. Okay, so I'm in BIAN. Okay, so like I say, BIAN is just a reference model off the shelf. That's what it is. It talks about service domains. Okay, so it has over 300 of those, which I'm guessing you guys can't read at this resolution. Sorry, there's lots of service domains in here. For example, that one, security, delivery, and receipt management. That's the sort of familiar view that people know, the service landscape, and as I said, it's version 8. So behind the scenes, though, with this is an entire, what we would certainly call a service catalog. Okay, it's literally a catalog, which means a list of things. Okay, so you can see there's over 300 rows in this catalog. Lots of metadata around these services. So of course, descriptions and things like that. And as we go out to the right here, you can see there's business roles, there's what's called a control record, which is essentially the kind of deliverable or the document that's involved. You've got examples, you've got objects like information that's involved, you've got processes that are involved, you've got departments that should be using it. So you've got a whole lot of interconnectedness. So the service as it is, and it's a service-oriented architecture, the service as it is the hub. It's the hub that joins together technology, process, people together. Okay, and you've got to think of it like that. Too often when people think of service-oriented architecture, and certainly the ArchiMate's guilty of this, they have this layered approach where you have these layers in between your business application, let's say technology as a simple 3-layered model, and then a service layer in between. The problem you have with that is this effect we call the Michelin man. You're effectively forcing a very rich layer through an abstract layer, and you lose a lot of the structure of your actual enterprise. Okay, you should definitely think of it a different way, which is a service is like in that case, a ternary relationship, so a 3-way relationship that binds people, process, and technology together. A service technically can bind as many different dimensions together as you want. Okay, so we certainly have services binding like 7 dimensions together, right? Anyway, so that's a more rigorous way of thinking of a service-oriented architecture. It's not a layered approach, which is what ArchiMate advocates, and I disagree with. It's more of a hub, a way of interconnecting things that are in different domains. Okay, so this is the way BIAN looks at things, which is great. Now these are explorable, and you know, when you start doing like kind of impact analysis, like I can drill into this, right? So I can go into this. So a tree map is of course like a landscape view, right? It's showing you exactly those same rows on the left, but hierarchically grouped. Okay, so I'm now down at 2 levels. If I go into this area, the cross-product operations, right, you can see that the catalog on the left is filtering, right? You know, we're down to only 39 service domains now, grouped into these 4 different business areas. Okay, and we're 3 levels down the hierarchy now. But you can start to kind of, you know, understand how these things interact with each other. On the right here, and some of these graphs we've got here, we're showing essentially the popularity of different, in this case, object classes or control records. So you can see here already that the majority of service domains actually have a single control record for each of them, okay, which is okay, but it, you know, is a lot of documentation, okay, as opposed to the information side of things, right? So over on the right here, we can see some different information objects. So that's payments as an object, you know, this sort of, I think accounting. So, you know, if I click this payment one, right, you know, it's going to go and filter. I have to mouse off, so it tells the other portlets to update. You know, it's filtered it down to 4. You know, there's 4 service domains that are using this information object. Okay, and we're just exploring the repository. You know, if I go out here, you'll see that, of course, you know, they're all using payments as an object class here. These are now the processes that are involved, and of course, you know, in this case, there's no information underpinning that. When we talk about people and technology, we haven't underpinned it there. But, you know, you've got all the different bits out of BIAN, of course, off the shelf. So your challenge, of course, would now be to fill in these parts. Right? You know, it is as simple as, you know, just double clicking and you know, starting to fill in things, right? It's, you know, it's very easy to be populating here. It is a case of obviously democratizing this, right? Because you've got hundreds and hundreds of rows of things to do. So needless to say, lots of content there that, you know, is all kind of filtered together. But if we go and have a look now in another dashboard, so we've gone through like kind of the service layer, let's drill in and have a look at one of these service domains. So let's have a look at one that's called check processing. You know, there's 300 of these. We could have used any. Yeah, essentially, it's down within the payments, as you saw, like just where I went in the hierarchy. It's down inside payments domain. But this is where you start to see how things are connected. Now we've got a diagram here. Okay, it is just say a box and line, but I guess it's circles and lines. Yeah, we're using a notation here, right? Again, BIAN doesn't advocate any notation. By notation, I mean literally the symbols we're using here. ArchiMate doesn't have a notation either. Okay, so you want to try and choose something that's palatable to the business. You know, these sort of notations we've got here, we've got lots of these. You can import any shape from Visio you like. Okay, you can design your own shapes. But you know, these sort of notations are pretty good. You know, they're generic. They don't come with much baggage. Okay. Your enterprise will have their own notation, right? So one of the things you'll certainly do is configure this and change it to be familiar for people. But what you can see here is the different dimensions that are intersecting with check processing, right? You've got the different processes here, okay? You've got the department there, okay? You've got other service domains. So the service domains are interconnected, okay? You've got technology. So there's a couple of applications here, okay? And then you've got all those objects, right? Those data entities that are involved. Okay, so you've got people, process, technology, right? All integrated with a service concept as the hub, right? Okay, so you can see that it's this kind of trinity of relationships being pulled together. There's other ways you can explore this kind of stuff. So we have this thing which is called a graph view. Okay, so essentially it's using the same notation that you might be doing in a diagram, but it's, you know, it's a lot more interactive. You know, I can click on a node here and explode it. So that's done the same thing. Yeah, that's taken check processing and shown me now the applications. Okay, so you can see Aperta here. It's got the processes. It's got the finance department, right? So the same content that you might be seeing, you know, can be shown in different ways. So these graph views are pretty powerful ways of exploring repositories. You know, you can go and explore anywhere you need to, you know, and see whatever things are connected to. So I won't go too far through there, but it's a great, simple way to explore how things are interconnected, right? And find you know, where complexity is. You know, obviously a big fan out is a lot of complexity. Okay, but you know, you can produce these sort of dashboards. Remember, self-service. You know, this might be for the domain architect or the service architect who's responsible for this domain, right? In this service domain. So you can auto-generate all these sort of things, right? You know, so you don't need to pre-can them. Okay, let's move into the technology world. So remembering what you're wanting to do is take something like BIAN and then apply a standard set of content beneath the covers, right? So taking the business layer from BIAN and underpinning it with your technology. So this is a very simple application list. I'm sure you've all got your spreadsheets with your hundreds of applications in them with whatever properties you're already tracking. So again, ABACUS can just adapt to whatever metadata you have. So there's a very simple list here. This is we've got some example applications in here. It's all just kind of dummy data. But you've got some interesting properties here, right? You've got things like the application criticality. Okay, you've got things like a recommendation, and we'll come back to that. But essentially, you're starting to look at whether a future state for it. You're trying to say, look, these are applications that we like, and so we want to try to retain them. So there's different models. You would have heard of TIME, which is tolerate, invest, migrate, eliminate. So that's one that Gartner advocates. There's another one called 4Rs, which is retain, refresh, redesign, retire. These are these quadrant-based approaches, which are actually deterministic, right? So you can do a business fit versus a technology fit. So we have algorithms for all these things. We've got lots of them. And so you can take factors like the criticality, okay? You can take a factor like how many users does it have? You can take a factor like what standards, what technology standards is it using? These things all can influence the algorithm, which has been no-coded, to come up with a suggestion for what we think the future state should be. So remembering, the suggestion doesn't mean that's your decision, right? Your recommendation. Okay? A suggestion is just the machine, in this case, giving a recommendation. That may be a machine learnt recommendation, it may be a deterministic algorithm, or a combination of both of those things. Okay? So the idea being, though, is you're managing this technology stuff, but you're underpinning your whole service model, which you're getting from BIAN, with the context of all these applications. Okay, so now you start to have an understanding of, where do they all fit in? And you're maintaining this in a nice democratic way. There's lots of people doing that. Okay, and obviously once you've got that, you can start to do a lot of that analytics. So this is a standard application portfolio dashboard. Again, I won't go into this too much. We've got whole webinars about this. That's showing you that kind of portfolio view where you might look at like business fit versus technical fit. Okay, so the top right quadrant are applications that both the business and the IT teams are happy with. Okay, so they're probably ones that you're going to invest in. Okay, they're certainly ones you're going to retain. Okay, the bottom left, of course, are ones where both sides are unhappy. Okay, and so they're probably ones you're going to retire. Top left, okay, is where the technical fit is low, but the business fit is high. So that's clearly a tech refresh quadrant. Okay, so you can see how this is all pretty deterministic. If you can score it for business fit and technical fit, you can already start to make a suggestion. And that's important here because those colors are actually the recommendation. Okay, and you can see that in the catalog here, like retain is green, retire is red. Okay, so the recommendation for CRM, okay, is bottom right. Okay, down here, the recommendation is, maybe actually to refresh it, even though it's on the borderline. Here we've got something that we're saying, look, we should retire it, even though the business is happy with it. And then there might be a whole evolution, what we talk about as an evolution, a scenario where you're showing how that application is getting retired, but we're replacing it with a better one. Okay, so all that kind of road mapping side of things is possible, which takes us to the next dashboard, which is, of course, the classic kind of road mapping way of looking at things. So again, we've done whole presentations about this. I won't spend too long on this, but a roadmap is kind of means many things to many people. We talk about 4 types of roadmaps, okay? A Gantt chart, which is what you're looking at here, is actually what we call a type 2 roadmap. All you need to do a Gantt chart is some date properties. Okay, and you can see that in the catalog at the bottom there. So if I was to go and explore one of these, let's go into maybe finance, right? The finance dashboard, so the finance roadmap has a collection of applications there, in fact, just 4 of them. And they've got their individual timelines. We can call this a life cycle or a timeline as well, with dates. You can see those dates down the bottom there. They're all editable. But what we normally find happens is people calculate those dates, okay? So once something's gone into production, okay, you might have various standards on the technologies that you're using. Those standards might be going end of life, okay? So you now start to infer the end of life for an application due to the dates on the standards on the application. Where do you get those dates from? We have integrations with things like Technopedia, okay, which are, there's literally millions and millions of standards with their end of life dates that we can use, and you can then infer those dates into a roadmap. Now, remembering all of these things should still only be seen as suggestions, because you might now go, oh, I've identified a problem here. This thing's going end of life because that standard, Win 7 or whatever's out of support. So I need to go and do a tech refresh and, of course, extend that date out. So, yeah, don't get too hopeful that this is going to just solve your problems for you. It's just throwing up suggestions, right? It's giving you insights into your portfolio, and it's hopefully informing your decision making so that you can defend it. You're doing all this live, like this all works on a tablet, of course, and you're doing this live when you're in a business meeting and someone's asking, oh, why are we retiring IVR? And you go, oh, okay, well, it's got end of life because it's using, whatever, SQL Server, something that's going end of life. So we need to actually port it across to this other application and rah, rah, rah. So you can have that whole conversation with the business right there and then, which of course builds trust, okay, and expands out your value to the organization, because you now get involved in all of those decisions and obviously empower people to make informed decisions. Okay. The last one I'm going to just pop up here is actually just a quick dashboard that does show a bit under the covers some of the things that are there. So we've got some KPI portlets here, which are those numbers and stuff like that. So they're being calculated. And you can see a no-code algorithm there that I've got on the right. I'm not going to edit any of these here today. We've got webinars about all that. But basically, it's block-based. So what this algorithm is doing is it's simply looking at each business domain, okay, counting up the complexity, which is essentially counting up how many applications are involved in delivering that business domain, and then writing that number back onto the business domain. So it seems very simple, right? But it's obviously a very powerful algorithm that starts to give you some insight into the complexities you might have in your portfolio. Now, we can compare those complexities with benchmarks. Okay, that's something like BIAN is particularly good for. So when we come back to looking at, right back to where we started with the landscape view, which is a diagram, a whole lot of boxes, there's actually ways you can quickly heat map that. Okay, so I've got a heat map here, which is the same landscape, but this time heat mapped according to complexity, only in a few areas. So I'm not sure if you can see the color differences there, but there's kind of some stronger red versus softer red, more salmon colors. So being able to draw the attention of the users to where you think there's unnecessary complexity in your enterprise is very powerful, right? That's just a dashboard, in this case a single diagram, that just continually updates. So as your application owners are doing whatever they're doing, filling in their portfolios, making decisions. So as you've democratized the whole way that people are tracking the digital map or the digital business that you've got, these sort of dashboards are continually being updated, and your business stakeholders can see what's going on here. And you can obviously use this as a trigger for conversations you might want to have just by overlaying heat maps, or in this case, they're a color marker, onto a standard familiar view. So anyone who's familiar with BIAN would recognize this view, and you can start to actually, basically color it according to the way that, the different recommendations, or in this case, the criticality might be. I'll jump into one other one, maybe this one, this heat map. So this one, is just showing two markers on the different, this is about the top level, though, at the business domain level. So it's using an aggregated metric that's aggregating right up. These you can see some color markers down here, right? These color markers, they might be the cost of that business domain. They might be your reference to, your relative performance to benchmarks for that business domain. So this is the idea of these reference frameworks. It's using a familiar view, in this case, 300 boxes all grouped in a certain way, to communicate the underlying work that you're doing as an architecture office to come up with different recommendations and give insights and things like that. So yep, that's about it. So that's really, like I said, it's a bit of a whirlwind tour. We don't have too much time today. So yep, just to quickly wrap up and pass back to Aaron, and yep, we should have some time for some questions. We've got a great tool. We have the best tool on the market. We're the leader of all the Magic Quadrants and the Forrester Waves and all that kind of stuff. That's fine. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the team. But you would have heard the phrase, a fool with a tool is still a fool, right? The tool is not going to, replace any of us. It's just going to hopefully inform us. And we always talk about giving some quantitative guidance, right? So obviously it gives you some numbers. So these don't just become, subjective debates, right? They become objective conversations, okay? The model is going to be wrong. All models are wrong, but some are useful, right? It's going to be wrong. So, you've got to accept that the tool is not going to be right, but it hopefully gives you, something you can use to have a conversation and, talk about things, with numbers and make things much more objective. Okay. So just with that, so yeah, as I said, obviously go and have a look on our website. You've got the web address down the bottom right there, my contact details there. We're going